listening to In-Fisherman Storyline, North America's top voice in multi-species freshwater angling. Here is your host, Thomas Allen.
Hey folks, Thomas Allen here with In-Fisherman, and before we get started today, I wanted to pass along some exciting news as we welcome LL Bean as presenting sponsor of In-Fisherman Storyline podcast. LL Bean is an iconic brand known for its quality outdoor gear and a deeply rooted passion for everything outside. Not to mention they make a pretty mean plaid flannel shirt. Check this thing out. Awesome. This partnership will bring more great stories, expert tips, and outdoor inspiration to anglers everywhere. LL Bean, we are glad to have you a part of this. So welcome to the palatial LL Bean Studios nestled atop the twin In-Fisherman Towers overlooking beautiful downtown Brainerd, Minnesota. Stay right there. A new episode of In-Fisherman Storyline presented by LL Bean is coming right up. Man, that's got a nice ring to it. Thanks for coming, fellas.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of special guests this week, and we're going to talk about some interesting topics. Jason Bahr is the owner of Tutt's Bait and Tackle on Mille Lacs. If you've ever been to Mille Lacs, you know exactly where that is. And he brought his youngest son, Tyler.
Yep.
Also the better looking of the two, inarguably. And we're going to talk about youth fishing. We're going to talk about bait management and importing, exporting in Minnesota. We're going to talk about walleye regulations. And not necessarily to make anybody mad, but really to discuss issues that are affecting anglers all across the state here in Minnesota. And this has been I think a year, I think you probably agree, Jason, where we ran out of bait.
We're out of bait.
And it's happened before. It's been threatening to happen before. I think conditions have just been getting tougher to get bait. But let's start out with what's going on. I mean, you guys, you have bait tanks at your bait shop, and some of them are
empty. Yeah. And the problem in Minnesota, I mean, we truly are the walleye capital of the world, right? We have more shoreline of walleye water than anywhere in the world. And, most guys can get away with, they'll still go fishing, right? In the summertime, if I can't get a shiner, I can throw a crankbait, I can figure something out. But in the wintertime, there is a group of guys that just don't go. If they cannot get a golden shiner, they just don't go. And guess what? We ran out of golden shiners literally 3 weeks into the season this year.
Boy.
I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible. And I try not to look at it from a business aspect, but when you're a business owner, you have to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my average ring in the shop, say, is $42. To be honest, that's exactly what it is. And I can scroll down and I can see how much of that is live bait. And between $9 and $11 is live bait. So when I don't get the guy in the shop to buy golden shiners, guess what? Not only do I lose out on that dozen shiners, but I lose out on a lot more than that. So it's frustrating for us. It's incredibly frustrating for us. And one thing, something actually interesting happened this weekend. I had Brian Nurbon in my shop. He's a fisheries manager of Mille Lacs Lake. And he's not on the work group for the live bait, but he gets it. And more I've been getting these guys involved. In fact, this is the third time now Brian's been in my shop, but he noticed. He in fact, he even said it without me saying anything. He goes, well, that guy's got a Vexlar. That guy's got 2 fishing poles. Oh, look at that guy's buying his kid the new tackle box. And these folks, we were busy. We had the Ducks Unlimited contest. And he said himself, look at all these things that these guys and gals are buying because they came in here for live bait.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I got news for the DNR. You want to absolutely destroy small businesses, take away live bait managing like you've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what? On normal occasion, Thomas, if you want a Vexlar, you know what? You're probably going to go to Shields. You want a live scope, a Mega Live 2, you probably go to Fleet Farm. You don't generally come to shops my size to buy that stuff. We thrive, we strive, we need live bait.
Mm-hmm. Well, Minnesota has long been known as one of the the regulations to fish here are insane. And one of the examples I'll give you is I worked at Bassmaster for 5 years, and when we came to Mille Lacs for the Angler of the Year Championship, they asked me to talk a little bit about what, to the staff at Bass about what type of regulations exist here at Minnesota. And I said, well, first of all, don't get caught driving your boat across town on the trailer with the plug in. And it doesn't matter if you're driving from Wisconsin to North Dakota. If you get stopped and the plug is in your boat, you're in trouble. And largely that's because they want to prevent the spread of invasives. And I think we can all get behind that to a certain extent. But as we've gotten further down this zebra mussel trail, we're finding that it's not really that big of a problem. Now, I'm not advocating you take zebra mussels and put them anywhere or dump gobies in any type of water. That's not a good thing. But I think the regulations have largely, with what we're seeing with our country right now, have created jobs that maybe aren't necessarily totally necessary. They've added to the regulations across the board, and we're all paying for that to some extent. So I'm not saying we get negligent, but one of the biggest problems you're dealing with is you are not able to bring bait in from over state lines. Yeah. So before we talk about that, explain what it is about a golden shiner that's so popular.
It's just a good bait in the wintertime. It's walleye candy. They're fairly hardy. And they'll catch them. I think that's what it boils down to. It will absolutely catch them. And what's funny is you brought up a good point. Minnesota has spent more money on AIS. Now I'm going to stick my neck out here a little bit, and I'm going to say up front before I do this that I work with the DNR a lot, all the way to the top level. I just talked to Sarah Stroman yesterday. So sorry in advance, but you know what? I've said it to you guys, and I'm going to say it here. We've spent more money than anybody, and we have a bigger problem than the rest of the country combined. Mm-hmm. I mean, literally, it seems that way. In fact, I was talking to another bait dealer up in Longville the other day, and I'm not going to say exactly what he said, but he said, we are the dirty you-know-what of the country. Mm-hmm. People don't want to import our bait from us because we've got all these problems. Mm-hmm. You look at North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Iowa, right around us, a lot of our water connects. We're the one with the problems, but yet we're the state that every time you go to the landing, you got to jump up in your boat and show the guy your live well's dry and your plug is, and he's going to inspect your trailer for 20 minutes. Or what I really love is when you pull in and the kid doesn't even look out of his book, and that my dollars, and I say my dollars, my tax-paid dollars, mm-hmm. are paying that kid mm-hmm. to sit there and read his book. Come on. It hasn't worked for how long? Why are we doing this?
Well, it's not just anglers, and I know the three of us launch our boats all the time on a regular basis, and you're dealing with these folks, and for the most part, they're pretty nice, and they're doing their job. I can give you a couple examples. I've lost my cool a time or two. Yeah, I'm good for that. But there are times when, if I'm going to stop, let's be courteous of everybody around. If there's a long line running out the driveway to the boat ramp and it's the 4th of July or whatever the day it is, you don't need to go through the splash well. You don't need to take a flashlight down the side of the boat and let's keep things moving, because I think anglers are the advocates for this. We're the ones that want the fisheries to be healthy. We're the ones that want future generations to enjoy what we have. And I've heard this. It was just yesterday someone told me this, that there are now or incoming much stronger regulations for the ballast boats or the wake boats. Now, I say make them illegal. Just want to be honest. Those boats put water in their boats, and I'm talking hundreds of gallons.
And it stays there.
Well, you want to talk about shoreline damage? That's a whole nother discussion. But there are regulations that are affecting, I guess, the folks that want to play by the rules, and then there are the other groups of people out there that have the same right to be on the lake as we do, that should have to follow those same regulations, that either they're uneducated or they don't know. So it's going to affect us. You're absolutely right. But let's get to the bait thing now. So you're out of golden shiners. That's a staple for Minnesota ice anglers. Mm-hmm. What would be? I mean, could you drive to Iowa and buy them?
I could. In fact, I think guys do. They're not stopping it. So you know what? Because of what I do, because of the coaching that I do, because of the youth organizations I do, and because I don't want to go to jail, I follow the rule very black and white. But all of a sudden, guys with shops like mine all of a sudden have gallons and gallons and gallons of shiners, and I call around all over the place to find them. Now, bait guys are very, very territorial and very taboo if you talk to another bait guy. But they're coming. They're coming in. They're coming in. I've heard some guys refer to their shiners as Bama shiners or sassy shiners. Sassy ones to laugh at because Arkansas farm-raised shiners are our answer. Okay, that's our answer. Arkansas farm-raised shiners. In fact, there are bait dealers from Minnesota that have sent our golden shiners down to Minnesota to breed with these shiners. They ship them up to Wisconsin. There's a big group up there called Robinson. They're here. They're getting here. But it's illegal for me to get them. I mean, it's ridiculous. And you want it. Here's the bottom line, Thomas. Do you want to spend $15 on a dozen shiners?
No.
I mean, I don't want to charge $15 for a dozen shiners. But when I got to pay $11 for a dozen shiners, I got to pay a young man or gal to scoop them up, and I got to keep my lights on and all that. It has so many different effects on, and it's all common sense. I want to leave you with one more idea on this. Okay, I told you these shiners can come from Arkansas. Okay, farm raised, by the way. Let's keep that in mind. These are farm raised. So all my shiners, say all the shiners from Minnesota, go on a truck. Okay, truck drives up to Wisconsin. That guy or gal gives it to 5 different bait dealers. That bait dealer, those 5 bait dealers, bring it to, say, 20 bait dealers that end up in my shop, okay? For this to happen, what they're worried about is carp. I got to get a male and a female in the same load, okay? When I'm talking same load from Arkansas, okay? Then those 2 buddies got to get to the same wholesaler. And then they got to get to the same bait dealer. Then the bait dealer's got to bring them to the same bait shop into mine. They got to go in my tank. My tank's 3 feet by 4 feet of the thousands we just brought up. I've got to scoop those things up into the same bag. And then the guy's got to go out to Mille Lacs and illegally dump them out in the lake. And those 2 things got to find each other on Mille Lacs Lake and mate.
Sounds like there's an app for that.
I mean, what are they? I'll take those, Thomas. I'll take those odds.
Yeah, those are not. It's not a big deal. And legally, when you're done with fishing for the day, you're supposed to dump your bait out.
Yeah,
you're not supposed to release it in the lake. That's a regulation, which I don't have a problem with.
No, and you would literally, for it to happen, you are legally doing that. And guys know better than that, right? Guys know better to do that. Most guys now have these great big bait tanks or a sink in their garage. We have lithium aerators now, aerators that plug in, and their bait never leaves the lake. When it dies at home, or it's in a fish's belly. That's how it dies. They don't just. It's too expensive. I'm not going to dump out 2 dozen shiners and go, oh my gosh, it'll go $30.
If you spend $15 a dozen, like, you're going to keep those things alive as well as you can.
That's what you do.
Yeah, and so one of the questions I have is Minnesota with all the water and my I'm a bass guy. I don't like live bait. I'm a little squeamish. The only time I like it is when I'm musky fishing in the fall. And this is another example. Those suckers are anywhere from $15 to $25 a pop, and sometimes they're hardy, sometimes they're not. So I've had a fish get chomped on the lake, not get killed, put it back in my live well, put it back in the water it came in because I am following the rules, go home, put it back in the tank that I'm keeping it in, and it lives another day and gets bit again. So like you can get a couple usages out of those things, and I know musky guys are all the same. They're not throwing that stuff away with how much those are. And so I kind of feel like we need to probably come to some level of understanding of if these regulations are in place to protect our fisheries, okay, a lot of that bait is coming from Minnesota. So what's the problem, right? If it's all inside our state lines with us transporting it home and back again to reuse again because of how much money is involved in getting it. So What is your understanding of Minnesota's bait management? Are there farms here? Is it all wild caught, commercially fished? How does it work?
So that's a pilot program we're leaning on right now, right? Is these private? There's grant. I could get a grant right now to raise golden shiners, and I was actually at a bait dealer meeting with the DNR and about 10 other guys just last week, just up the road here, and one gentleman. And bless his heart, they're trying, okay? I'll give him credit for trying, but he says, he's not a bait guy. He says, I got 200 pounds of golden shiners. I raised 200 pounds of golden shiners in my bait tank. I'm like, 200 pounds? I mean, that sounds pretty, I don't know. And I'm sitting around 10 other bait guys. There's 10 other bait guys and me, the bait dealer. And so I hit the guy on the shoulder and said, well, what's that? And he grabs his calculator and goes, that's 8 gallons. Like 8 gallons? I went through 200 gallons of shiners last opener of fishing. 8 gallons? What's that? What are we going to do? I mean, come on. Mm-hmm. And the problem with golden shiners is once they get in a pond and you get a bullhead, you get a stickleback, you get a fathead, they have to kill the pond. The golden shiners need specific water, and that water is going away due to, lots of different reasons. Habitat, some of it. Farmland, obviously. People are using the land. They're just, if you owned a farm, are you going to want to use your pond for golden shiners?
No. And see, that's a discussion I've had across the country where the upper Midwest, especially along the Mississippi River, the farming practices affect the fishery in Venice, Louisiana. Now, if these farmers have never been down there to experience what we're talking about, they're not going to care. And for the most part, they aren't going to care anyways because grain prices are up and down. They got to make a living. They got to feed their family. They're going to plant fence row to fence row. So even if you do bring awareness to farming practices that are affecting local bait or fisheries in the South, the likelihood of it changing is basically none.
Right.
Because like you got to sell bait to keep your shop open. You need to pay the folks you have working there, so that makes the bait you do have more expensive. And it's just a never-ending cycle, but there is something that can be done here, and that is let's open up the borders for importing bait.
Why not? 48 other states have done it, by the way, Thomas.
Oh.
Guess how many of them have shut it down?
Not Minnesota?
Nobody.
Nobody?
Nobody who has started importing. So us and Maine are the only two that can import. 48 states. We have 48 different sets of data that we could go to and we could use, and we could say, hey, what challenge did you have? Zero issues.
Let me give you an example. A good friend of mine in Iowa, he's been on this show a couple times. He's a game warden, and he's a huge proponent of youth bass fishing. This is a topic we'll get into shortly. But when I still lived in Iowa, we were trying collectively to get the state bass limit changed from 3 to 5 so that you could give a real-world application experience to youth who were participating in the youth fishing. Now, the limit is 3 there. I really don't care. If it's 3, that's fine. But maybe let's make an example. Let's make an exception for the youth so that they can manage 5 fish in their live well. That's the standard, right? We know that's how it works.
Everywhere.
And the DNR, this is a thing I've run into at numbers of states I've lived in or worked with officials. There's a lot of personal bias that goes into these regulations. Now, I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong, but there are times when it certainly is. And as this example goes on, the DNR, the head of the DNR, I'll leave his name out of this. Someday I'd love to have a conversation with this guy.
Yeah.
I've tried a few times, and there are a lot of stories, but he is a walleye fisherman, and he does not like catching bass at all. So he wants to make bass fishing as hard as possible in the state of Iowa. That's the way it was. Completely put walls up. Wouldn't have conversations about this. We went to his office. I was doing a weekly column in 38 Iowa newspapers in those days, so I wrote about this. He grew to dislike me. We have a mutual relationship right now. Well, the DNR was not going to work with us. And so Jeremy got to know a Western Iowa man that was working to become a player in the state legislature. Became elected representative, worked his way up, and the guy loved to fish. He got to know Jeremy through some various activities and what have you. And he's like, well, the DNR doesn't necessarily call the shots. They enforce a lot of the rules. They bring this stuff it comes from the DNR. So if we hear regulation, we're thinking, oh, the DNR, they're screwing us. And they can be a roadblock.
A rule, yeah.
However, the alternative here is to maybe go the legislative route where, hey, look at the money we're missing out on. If you, our state representatives, care about small business, you care about the fishing community, you care about all this other stuff, then help us help them. And that might be the path to go where, all right, DNR, we've tried working with you. You're not working with us to make this happen. We're going to shove it down your throat. I hate to say it that way, but as we're seeing in our nation right now, there's a lot of corruption, and I don't believe for a minute there's no corruption in our state DNRs.
You know, it's funny, Thomas, that you bring that up because actually last fall, our legislators, so it was up to last fall, it was a law, not a rule. So if it's a rule that the DNR can change or manipulate, we call it a rule. If it's something that legislation has to change, then we got a law.
Yep.
Our legislators passed a law that gave the DNR the okay to import. And it's funny, you talk about the gentleman from Iowa. We have two guys in office right now at the very top level who are getting close to retirement. And I've heard this several times, and I don't know how much truth there is to this, but they are afraid that they're going to be the guy or the gal that brings in and imports bait and then all of a sudden destroys
we got Asian carp.
Fisheries. Yeah. So that's what they're afraid to death of. It's not going to happen.
No.
I'm sorry. We are, like I mentioned earlier, the other bait guys around the country call us the dirty you-know-what because we have it. We're not good. I'm sorry, but
no, it's a recurring issue, and it's not just. I mean, you want to get me fired up? Let's talk about the wolf problem here. Like there are certainly issues that they want to ignore, but what we have is, and I can get behind this. We have an amazing fishery in Minnesota, arguably the best fishing on the planet. I mean, show me better, okay? Mm-hmm. I think it's worth protecting. I think it's worth spending money and having folks at boat ramps to make sure everything's clean. Like, I'm down with all that. I can get behind it. But when we're so close-minded to, I guess, a theory, right? We don't know the long-term effects of zebra mussels. I mean, we know there's been some long-term effects that are actually positive, but we don't want to talk about that right now. There is a point where people need to look at how things are affecting the people utilizing the resource. I mean, there are people in the cities that think the wolf is their spirit animal, so they're going to vote against any type of wolf management, right? That's garbage. It's nonsense. The people utilizing the resource know that wolves need to be managed, especially a reintroduction of an apex predator. This same goes for fishing. If you love Minnesota fisheries, but you go to the cabin once or twice a year and you're not fishing, I don't think your opinion matters on how we manage bait, import, export, manage zebra mussel cleaning, etc.
Exactly.
But we have a lot of that. That's a big problem in our nation. It's a big problem in our state. So I think there needs to be an asserted effort, and you're probably already doing this the way it sounds, is get bait dealers together, get fishermen together, and there needs to be presentations made to legislatures to get this changed.
Absolutely. I sit on a board with MinFish. MinFish was started by Ron Schara and has some pretty influential people on that board, and I do think they're making progress. That's this last bait meeting I went to just last week. That was the one response. Well, we'll try to work with wildlife to get you guys more water. Well, you work with so now we're going to add more red tape. Okay, yeah. So let's add more red tape. And oh, by the way, wildlife says there's turtle eggs there. Nope. There's a duck. There's duck's nest in that pond. Absolutely not. No, we've got a little wolf pack. There's no possible way that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So instead of cutting red tape, let's just use some common sense stuff. Let's add some more red tape. Let's sit on our hands a few more years and see where it goes. And right now we're going to see as a great example. I mean, isn't it business 101 when you can export, but you can't import? What does that do to your economy? I mean, are you kidding me?
It doesn't work. It's a failed business before the hat even drops. I mean,
where does it work in the world? Mm-hmm. And not fishing in the world. And any basic economist 101 will they tell you that you're going to be able to export everything and not import? It's ridiculous.
Well, as we know, common sense is a superpower nowadays. So I think it's a matter of awareness. I think the more that we get the word out that this is going on, and like I said, I don't particularly use a lot of bait, but there's a tremendous level of our population that wants and needs live bait to be successful, and that it doesn't just impact bait shops. It impacts rod and reel manufacturers. It impacts wheelhouse dealers. It impacts the big box stores. Like, everybody would benefit from a better, more well-oiled machine when it comes to bait policies in the state. And
absolutely,
I'm afraid it's just another failed policy amongst numbers of them.
What about the revenue that gets driven in that has to be spent on fishing and outdoors? And I'm sorry, but there is no doubt there is a group, a part of the population that when we ride out our shiners 2 weeks into the season, Dad and little Johnny just don't go fishing.
They don't go fishing. They don't buy licenses.
Right. They go skiing. They go to the hockey game. They go to the basketball game, because I'm so confident that I can catch a walleye with a golden shiner, but I don't think I can catch one on anything else. I just don't go.
Well, I think back to your early fishing days, and I am not meaning to leave you out of this, but your dad's doing a great job, so I'm kind of letting him go. But think about your early fishing days, Tyler. How often were you using live bait when you first started fishing?
Well, I mean, growing up walleye fishing, that's all we did. Summer, winter, fall, early season, no matter what, we're using shiners 99% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up ice fishing with my grandpa and great-grandpa. They had golden shiners. That's all they used, not fatheads, nothing. Had to be golden shiners.
It's a super important staple for anglers, whether they're young or old. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, if you're not recruiting the next generation, if they're not successful early on, they're not going to go back.
Thank you.
So there's recruitment and retention. There's a thing here that is super important that people are overlooking. Yeah, you don't want Asian carp and Mille Lacs, and for real, not a problem, right? First of all, there's muskies.
They're not coming.
Yeah, not going to be a problem. So if you want to get the next generation involved, you want to maintain their interest, they have to be successful early, and they have to have a desire to go back. And my early days was jamming as many crawlers on a little hook as I could possibly get, and whatever bit made me happy. So there is...
Everybody, Thomas.
That's it. That's where we start.
Everybody starts. And you know what? You hit it right on the head. In order to get a kid back fishing again, they've got to bend the pole. They've got to bend the rod, and they've got to have an enjoyable time, and they got to think that they can replicate that and do it again. And when you go out to a fish house and you're dropping a little plastic in an ice castle and not moving around, now don't get me wrong, that whole thing has changed, but the fact of the matter is we know it works. We know if we drop a golden shiner 18 inches up off the bottom, we've got a pretty good shot of catching something cool.
Let me tell you about ice fishing for me. I do it to survive winter, and now my son's of age where he can do all the work and be like, Dad, they're over here. I'm like, just call me when the house is set up. Like, is that not a good thing as a dad?
I love it.
So one of the things that I enjoy about this time of year is the simplicity of the sport. I enjoy going out on the ice, especially when the fish are biting, and I don't think that I'm not going to hole hop with plastics all day anymore. I used to do that. I mean, I had a good time, but to me, it's more of a reprieve. I know tournament season's right around the corner. I got boats to rig. You guys got boats to rig. We got stuff to do coming up. But right now, let's enjoy the season we have and go fishing. And to me, I want to sit in an ice house, or I want to sit in a flip over with a heater going. I want to watch a football game on my phone, and I want to drop a gooey bait down there that whatever is going to come in and eat it eats it. That's ice fishing to most people.
Yeah.
There's not. I think the contingent of hardcore ice anglers is pretty minimal.
Right.
Now, by hardcore, I mean like no house, drilling holes, walking, snowmobiles that are decked out. That's not the norm. That's the exception.
That's the exception. And most of those guys are doing it for some sort of living, right? I mean, they're doing it because that's the way they have to fish. I don't know how anybody would enjoy, packing all that set up and said, the guys that do it, kudos to you, but
yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not my way of doing it.
I don't want to do it. Now, when it's 45 degrees out, like it could be today, and I can grab a 5-gallon bucket, a rod, a graph, and go out there and sit on my 5-gallon bucket and catch a handful of bluegills and crappies on my crappie minnow or my waxworm, I'll take it any day. Okay? I'll leave it to these guys to go punch 100 holes and go chase them around and drop a little plastic and try to coerce a bite. Okay, I'm sorry, just doesn't sound that entertaining.
You're right, and I think that there's a point in time where that's a valuable way to spend your time. And as I've gotten older, I've learned that I really value the effort I put in those days to make the effort I put in now a little bit easier. Right? You're learning enough to not have to work like that. And again, if that's your jam, go do it. Like these guys do the Crappie Chronicles, so cool. Love that whole program. That takes some hard work.
Right.
I'm not doing that.
Right.
So anyway, if I'm trying to remember the year, but the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Survey, I think the last one that I read was 2015 or 17. I'm not exactly sure, but there's a couple numbers here that are very intriguing, and this will probably shed a little bit of light on why we're where we're at. License sales had decreased by some, I think on an average of like 4 to 6% a year over the last 25 years, right? But there was a time where it peaked, late 1990s, early 2000s. License sales were at an all-time high. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. You can look some of this stuff up. There is some data out there. But in the 2015 to 17 timeline, license sales were trending downward. Hunting and fishing, if it were a business, would be like number 25 on the Forbes 500 list. I mean, you talk big money in hunting and fishing. Of the licensed buyers, less than 20% fish tournaments. So that means 80% either don't fish tournaments or do not like tournaments.
Sure.
So you think about all the media that we see out there, the vast majority of media, especially in today's day and age, is tournament fishing. And that's fine. But then that other 80% largely goes unserved on the media front because they're not participating or don't care about tournaments, whatever they are. So those, to me, that 80%, those are your bait buyers.
Absolutely.
Those are the guys that want to go out, catch fish for the table, have a good time with their kids or grandkids, whatever. And that's the easiest path to success and retention, getting them back out there. So license sales are going down. We know Minnesota is a large proponent of opener and license sales. I'd like to know, I haven't seen this stat or data, but I'd like to know where Minnesota's license sales are over the last decade.
It trended up, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit about this later. You know, there was a trend up, especially in the younger age group. But you are so absolutely right, and I'll take it to another level. I mean, I think about when I was a kid, and maybe this is, you know, a poor, relationship what we're talking about, but I think it's important. You know, little Johnny goes out with Grandpa. They catch a 19-inch walleye. They take that home. They cut it up. They eat it. The family eats it. And Johnny, by golly, that is the most fantastic eating walleye I've ever had in my life. You know, there's just so many traditions that we overlook because of lack of common sense. It drives me nuts.
That's right.
Let's get back to our traditions. Let's get back to what got your grandpa into fishing and why he did it for 90 years. Mm-hmm. Let's get back to that stuff. And we've gotten so far away from it. It's sad.
It's sad. And I think the fishing market has driven a lot of that. And this is something I'm sure you guys would both agree with. Like, I feel like fishing businesses and manufacturers have this need to introduce new things every year, as opposed to toeing the line, standing on what's already made them popular, or has a whatever the product is, and electronics notwithstanding, that has to adapt, whatever. But as far as I'm concerned, whatever fishing electronics you have on the ice or on your boat doesn't take away from the fishing experience.
Yeah.
And we could go down this road 10 ways to Sunday, but there is absolutely room today, and if not more room than ever before, to rely on those traditions, to go back to what got you out there in the first place. Here's a good example. When my family moved us from Wisconsin to Iowa when I was in 4th grade, it was a tough time. We eventually lived in a small farm community, and there was a creek. And I'm going to use the word creek because in Iowa, that's what they are, a farm creek. And I spent every single summer day on that creek drowning worms and using cut bait to catch catfish. And eventually I discovered bass fishing and tournament fishing and muskies and walleyes and all these things that kind of turned my interest away from that. Well, since I came to In-Fisherman, now I've always enjoyed catching catfish, but I've not really gone out of my way to do it necessarily. When I came here, one of my first trips was to go down to Pickwick Dam and fish for blue catfish. And I had never done that. And I'm like, this sounds like a lot of fun. And it was one of the trips of my lifetime.
Sure.
And since I've been to several top catfish destinations, and what blows my mind is how the tradition of catfishing has not changed.
Right? It's the same.
The people are the same. The sport is the same. You don't need to have elaborate gear, elaborate boats. You just go, and by God, is it fun.
It's so funny that you say that. Like we're sitting here in In-Fisherman Mecca with, obviously Al Linder had a big part to do that, and I'm fortunate enough to know Al pretty good, and his son Troy. And just like the story you say about the catfish, I had one creek in town. It didn't have any catfish. It was full of carp. And so we had to catch carp. And I was the same kid, ride there after school, ride there on my lunch break, walk down there. My mom used to buy corn by the cases because she knew I was going to steal half of it. But it was never really that cool, right? Like then I discovered bass fishing and mostly walleye fishing and whatnot, but smallmouth bass. But anyways, now I look back at some of the new media content. I watched Troy Linder out there targeting carp.
Yeah, with a pack-up rod in some weird country somewhere.
Yeah, off the bank somewhere. And I just think it's hilarious because it resonates, because it brings me back to when I was a kid. That's all I had was a fishing rod, a can of corn, and probably 3 hooks and a few split shots to my name, And
I was stealing old nuts and washers from my dad's shop because I couldn't afford weights. I would just tie on a big nut and throw it out in the creek. But you do what you got to do. That's a good example, and I've known Troy for some time too, and also a very accomplished tournament bass fisherman.
Absolutely, great.
He knows how to catch them.
He can catch them. He fished with Billy Simito out there on the West Coast and had a lot of success. I think Angler of the Year 2 or 3 years in a row. And
yeah, I just think that as culture has pushed us in the direction of being first and having the latest and greatest, and I don't have a problem with that, but if it overshadows why you're out there, if it takes away from what got you started, then there's time for a good long look in the mirror, and that goes to the Minnesota DNR too. Take a good long look in the mirror. If you're here to support your local bait shops and you want to increase recruitment and retention and make the fishing as good as it is, and it's great, there's no doubt about it, but to make it better and to make it more accessible for people, then you have to make bait accessible for people. It's not rocket science.
It's not rocket science, and it needs to happen. I'm sorry. It has to happen. And I don't know. There is another bait meeting. So very adamantly, I'm a strong supporter of importation. I've been very vocal about that. In our last meeting, the fisheries manager, actually in the state, Brad Parsons, said, I don't want to talk about importation. I said, well, guess what?
Tough luck, bro.
We need to. We have to. And he did say now there's a meeting in March. I would encourage you to go, actually, CLC. And he said, we'll talk more about importation, but he said several times, just so you guys know, I'm not very open-minded. And it's like, dude, get on your cell phone, call these other states, call these other fisher managers, and see why you're not very open-minded, other than you don't want to be the guy that says, man, we had to shut down the fishery because we got carp.
I don't give a rip if he's not open-minded. His job is not to impose his personal objections and his personal perceptions on the public fishing in Minnesota. His job is to listen to what we have to say and do what our tax dollars fund that whole organization.
1,000%. 1,000%.
See, I just there's a point in this entire everything, and let's use Minnesota as an example. There are issues in every state. No one's going to doubt that. But there are so many neglected components to our outdoor experiences here. It's sad. And we're destroying it by the day.
Me and Tyler just talked about this on our last radio show. And this is going to get fixed. I don't understand why it took so long, but smallmouth bass, when they bed on Mille Lacs, I can drive around. I can throw a white tube on every single one of them. I could probably catch almost every fish in that lake if I spend enough time. So we're not protecting them then why are we closing the season?
Mm-hmm.
If we're not going to protect them when they're their most vulnerable on their beds, then why are we doing that? Same thing with largemouth bass. Largemouth bass are spawning when walleye opener is, when we can now fish them. Why are we closing the season?
Mm-hmm. I got two points on that. And one of the things that I had privy to when I worked at Bassmaster was to read a lot of the studies that they've produced for 35 plus years that indicate, and let me say this exactly how it needs to be said, that there is no impact on the fishery to hold a tournament during the spawn. Say that again. There's no impact on the fishery to hold a tournament during the spawn. Now, that said, I've talked to Doug here several times about doing a bedded smallmouth segment for In-Fisherman TV, and it's a no-go. Because the perception here, and this is not wrong, you can catch a smallmouth. This is part of why it's fun, but you need to think, logically and responsibly here, is a smallmouth will guard its bed to its death.
Sure.
They'll bite time after time, and that's really your opportunity at some big ones. And I think there's probably a point where we need to maybe say, all right, maybe we don't need to go out and jack 25 of the same fish we've been catching all week, right? There's a personal responsibility element there.
Sure.
But on the flip side, we do have fragile fisheries here in Minnesota, and when they're talking big southern reservoirs that are tens of thousands of acres. St. John's River, for example, the Bassmaster Elite Series was just there. A lot of bedded fish were caught, thrown in live wells, taken to weigh in. And guess what? That fishery, when the weather's right, is as good as it's ever been.
Sure.
So there's an element of that truth. But a small lake like here in Brainerd, like Round Lake, you don't want to pull 50 of those smallmouths off their beds to go to a live weigh-in. That would really affect that fishery.
Have a negative impact, yes.
So there's a point where we need to be conscientious of fish health, fishery health, etc. And I think that you can't compare Round Lake to Gunnersville. It's apples to oranges. They're two completely different fisheries, and I like the idea. This is more work for the DNR. It's more enforcement for the game wardens, but each lake probably needs to have, and maybe there's a group of lakes that receive the same regulations, but you look at a lake like Round Lake, you know what? You can only put one smallmouth in your live well a day, and it's this big, whatever it is.
Sure.
Sign needs to be hung up at the boat ramp. Regulations need to be there.
Sure.
Not advocating that happens here, but there needs to be probably an individual oversight on specific bodies of water.
You hit it on the head, and you're absolutely right when you say that people who fish and people who hunt, I believe, are the most conservationist-minded people on the planet. Mm-hmm. You know what? And again, we keep on talking about Minnesota and our ridiculous regulations, but for the most part, Minnesotans are going to manage themselves. Mm-hmm. That's why we cry about so many of these rules, because I go down to Florida and fish, and I have a blast. And I don't ever, we throw in a cast net, we catch our own bait. And if we want to eat it, we take it home and we eat what we catch. And we don't worry. If I want to use 2 fishing rods, I use 2 fishing rods. We don't worry about all these regulations that they don't seem to make sense. A lot, at least a lot of them don't seem to make sense.
I think, and this is true, I think, just in general with society, is we create regulations or for or against, like, smaller groups. Is there bad apples? Yeah. There are people that are going to flay the sides off a 6-pound smallmouth off of a bed. But the number of those people is minute, and I don't think they should do that. But if they do, it's not going to affect the fishery.
And those people right there, if there is a law like there is, I don't know what the percentage. Say half of those people don't care what the law is anyway.
That's right. If there's a law, they're not going to follow it.
I mean, they're going to. I love this. There's this kid on one of the pages I follow on social media. He's a Native American. He's in Wisconsin, and he spears musk.
I've seen this page.
And
hurts my heart.
He posts. Why do you think he's doing that? Oh my gosh, the reactions to it are wow.
But the lakes that he is spearing on are musky lakes where there's almost no other fish.
Sure.
He's not like gigging muskies out of Mille Lacs. I mean,
sure. It's like a musky fishery.
Yeah, there's a lot of those lakes in Wisconsin, actually, that have just native muskies, and I don't think there's really any other predator fish in there. But
sure.
But see, there's information we don't know a lot of times, and so I think there's a little bit of room for that. But back to your point about the season dates, I feel like we've gone down the road of trying to appease or hear the squeaky wheel. And this would be the 2 rods thing. Okay, if you have limits in place, 2 rods isn't going to affect anything. You might just get your limit sooner. Okay. And I don't particularly like trolling for muskies here in Minnesota because it's one rod. It's kind of like it'd be nice to double your chances. Okay, well, people say, well, it ruined the fishery. No, that's personal responsibility. Another thing, the season dates. Well, the season dates were implemented to protect fish on the beds. It's obviously not working that way anymore. So what's the point? I would be concerned about, and this might just be me, correct me if I'm wrong, would that bring too much additional attention to bass fishing in Minnesota that it'd affect the fisheries?
I don't know that, but I think it would bring in money. Mm-hmm. Plenty of guys as well as I do that go over to South Dakota for that early season, Wisconsin, because they can do it. And instead it's one of those things where we're exporting business. We're exporting business because of our seasons, and we're not importing that business back. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those. I don't know. I think our bass fisheries, and I'm not a biologist, are so incredibly healthy. Our bass are hardy. I mean, even with the, all the new technologies and whatnot, all this pressure with high school leagues and stuff. I mean, I can't point to a lake. No, every lake goes through ups and downs, right? But I look at Gull Lake. Gull Lake gets more pressure than any lake on the planet, and you can't get a better fishing bass lake. And I don't care if you want to catch 2-pounders or you want to catch 6-pounders. They're there. When I was a kid, fishing back in the Brandon and Cizik days when you used to dominate everything, I mean, if you had 12 pounds, you thought you could win that. Thursday nighters were out there every night.
I catch 12 pounds all the time. I'm good at that.
Yeah, now 12 pounds doesn't get you a whiff.
Doesn't get you anything.
12 pounds, you don't even want to weigh in. You want to go back out to the lake, dump your fish, and go straight to the pub and have a cocktail. Is what you want to do with that kind of weight.
Right. Or on the water. But anyway, the fishing is great here in Minnesota. Now, some things have changed. I think with the increased awareness of bass fishing. And I'll give an example. There's a lake out west that I've fished for 23 years. And when I first found it, there was nobody bass fishing it. In fact, I tried to pull in with my truck one day to check out the ramp, which was not a ramp. It was a shore launch. And this truck was coming out with these 2 old boys pulling their 14-foot Lund out. And I got out, talked to them, said I'd move and whatever, let them out. And I said, what's in here? And they're like, ain't nothing in here but sunnies. I'm like, oh. Well, maybe I don't want to come here and fish. Well, it turned out to be some of the greatest bass fishing I've ever experienced in my life. And it was, I mean this when I say it, like you could catch 25 pounds in 5 hours without any effort. I mean, they were just big. Now, I told too many people. I had buddies that told too many people. More boats started to show up. That lake now has a boat ramp, a dock, and a parking lot. And you're not catching those big fish anymore. Now, I say that. And this goes to your point just a minute ago. I can't say that was, I will personally hold responsibility for opening my stupid big mouth, but those fish were old when I was catching them to begin with. So, I mean, how long does it take to grow a 5-pound bass here?
Yeah, and did they reproduce?
Right? So, I mean, if it's 15 years, which I've heard-ish, 10, 12, 15 years, then that lake is still regenerating from that age class that may have died out. So it's easy to say things were better, and they probably were on certain lakes. Mm-hmm. But I know some guys around here that have found some exceptional fishing in the Brainerd Lakes area that compares to that era.
Yeah. And not just for bass, for walleyes and crappies. And that's one thing with technology, right, is, I mean, that lake that you had, you didn't have a lake map. Hopefully you could see a stump or a patch of pencil reeds or an old dock post that you could go fish.
Tyler, I was lining up a willow tree with the striped boat dock, and I was like, and then in the middle somewhere, I was a part of that. We were the last of the triangulation generation, right? So, do you suffer from UWL unexpected wader leakage? Don't worry, LL Bean has the solution to keep you on the water or in the water all day long, thanks to their double L waders that feature super seam, a roomy leg design for freedom of movement, and plenty of chest pocket storage. Keep your cell phone out of the water, and everything else is valuable, and you can learn more at llbean.com. And last question before we switch gears here. I want to get into the youth fishing that you spent so much time in, but regarding the bait situation, what's your solution?
We got to import. That's all. That's the only solution. And even if, hypothetically, they get these farms going. They get these farms to produce enough shiner minnows where it can support an entire population of walleye fishermen in Minnesota. That's going to take a lot of time. Give us a Band-Aid. Throw us a bone. Let us at least show we can do some common sense stuff without upending everything. And you know what? There's not a segment of the fishing industry that would get hurt if we imported a few minnows.
Mm-hmm.
That's all there is to it. Let's use common sense.
I agree. Across the board.
Across the board.
Can you remember a day, Tyler, where you didn't fish?
Fishing a long time, a lot of days.
I mean, that's the lifestyle, right? In the Bahr household is to go fishing.
I just like to fish.
So do
I love it.
I can't imagine life without it. And I think it impacted my career. It's impacted your career. I mean, it's what gets us out of bed in the morning. And I think largely what keeps me going, doing this job, writing and telling stories and taking photos and making videos is to share, is because the experience is so precious to me that the only way that I can share or convey my excitement when my kids catch a fish or when I catch a fish is to take a photo, is to make a video, is to just tell the story and be excited about it. But I think that somewhere along the line, I discovered that I wanted to be good at this. And if I were to be good at this, I needed to have something to measure myself against. And that was other anglers. And that eventually became tournaments. I fished my first tournament as a junior in high school. So 175 years ago, anyway. and my son, Tommy, is 17, and I don't know how many tournaments he's fished now.
He's got a great he's I'm just going to put it a quick plug in. He's having an awesome career thus far. So I'm excited to see where that goes.
Well, he's learning things as we go, but same with him and your boys. Like, he doesn't know a life without fishing or hunting. It's just kind of what we've done, and naturally he's gotten involved and has made a lot of good decisions. And he's got his own boat now. We got it torn apart in the garage, and we're rebuilding that here now. And he's going to be independent, and that's kind of a tough day. He's still been fishing with me, but now he's got his own truck, got his own boat, and I mean, it's what you want.
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
You want him to go out the door and be independent.
Absolutely.
But that's staring me in the face, Jason. I'm scared.
I love it. There's something really gratifying when Tyler calls me, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to blow out of the shop. I got the boat hooked up. You want to go catch a smallie? Jump in, just grab a pole. I got everything we need." Or, you know what I mean? Like, I love that. You mentioned the ice fishing thing. Dad, we got 50 holes punched. We got you up a little fish house set up. Come out and sitting there. I got a beer for you too. I mean, it's great. So I don't feel sorry for you, Thomas.
I know.
I think it's great.
It's a good way to live. But Tyler, one of the things I've been impressed by is you are scared of nothing when it comes to getting into a tournament. You fished classic bass here for how many years?
This is going to be my 4th season now.
And you're how old?
21.
That's pretty impressive. So classic bass is a Minnesota-based. I'd call it a near pro level.
Yeah.
Guys take it very serious, and they got wrap boats and jerseys and the whole shebang. And there's boats to win, big money to win. But you probably had a similar motivation as I did when I was young. You wanted to know where you stood, and so you've been fishing tournaments and you took it up to that level. Tell me a little bit about when you made that decision to fish that series.
Yeah, I mean, I've been fishing tournaments since 6th or 7th grade. I mean, the first year my dad started the fishing team, and I mean, first couple derbies, I'm like, I love this. Just a competitive edge. I mean, every so often I love to go have fun fishing just to set the hook and whatnot. But I've learned over the years I'm really competitive, and going through high school, I had a blast with it, made a ton of friends, and I was kicking around. Scott Bottomo, who ran it when I started, great guy. He talked me into it. He ran through the SATT, got to fish all over the country, fishing tournaments. I love tournaments. Got done with high school, and I go, I want to keep doing this. I don't want to, now that I'm done high school, I'm not done fishing tournaments. I want to go competitive. I want to see what I can do. And Scott reached out to me and wanted me to fish classic bass, and it's a lot of fun. I love it.
Well, you've had some good days. I've seen a lot of the shows they produce, and you've done pretty well out there. Is it compare it to the high school fishing though? Like it's a similar format to what we do here in Minnesota, and we're going to dig into that a little bit here, the student angling tournament trail. But you kind of were prepared for that, basically the way the high school events run.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just with the technology and stuff now, I mean, these high school anglers, a lot of them are jumping in those bigger tournaments. I mean, look at Easton Fothergill, the Bassmaster Elites now. I mean, look how many young guys are made the elites this year. Tucker Smith, Bo Browning, Easton Fothergill. I mean, those are all kids essentially that are around my age, a year or two older.
Mm-hmm.
That how many of these kids are going right from these big high school trails and going on to the elites, to the college derbies. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's almost all transitioning to that age group.
Well, it is transitioning that age group. Jason, you and I are no longer in that age group.
Right.
And it's a good thing. It's what we all wanted. And I think one of the complaints I've heard in recent years with some of the older pros is there's no way these young kids are that good. They shouldn't be that good. And I'm like, they are, because we created this platform, this springboard. Because I'll tell you what, if I had high school fishing, I might have had better grades, or I may have dropped out and just went fishing. I don't know. But if I'd have had that, my life would have been different. I think that there's an element of if you followed the top levels of bass fishing, there's a point where anglers their relevance begins to fade, and physically they're not able to compete, and sometimes they stick it out longer than they should, just like a boxer.
Right.
They always want to they want to retire at the top, but it seldom goes that way. So you have this younger generation coming in, and you're right. You gave a list of young guys that are absolute animals on the water. Well, they've been fishing since they were 5th, 6th grade, then the juniors, then they got to do a high school program, then they made it to college.
And they weren't fishing like we were, Thomas, on the competitive creek catfishing league, or the carp fish and corb.
they had
a little bit different,
and I feel like it's been a good thing. It certainly. I kind of feel like in our day, you played football, or you ran cross country, or you wrestled, or played basketball, or you played baseball and ran track. Like those were your options, and you were in one of them at some point. And I think just generally the way that this newer generation does high school sports, it's a little disappointing where you can't have all those other experiences. You kind of had to pick one, right, and roll with it. But that has its benefits, You certainly are better because of that. And I think fishing has offered. And trap shooting is another high school sport here recently that's offered kids that may not have the athletic drive
or ability
to get into these sports and do well. So they can get on the water, they can compete, they can experience competition, and take a sport they've grown up with and love and make it a high school sport.
Absolutely. And, it's kind of funny. I think high school fishing specifically, or junior fishing, either one, is kind of, it's very... we'll put our arms around these kids and we'll make it inclusive. And what I mean, you hear a lot about inclusivity nowadays, but this poor kid, and I keep on calling him Johnny. That's the only fake guy I got, poor Johnny. But Johnny jumps on the basketball team, and Tyler was Johnny. Tyler was Johnny. I went to my first basketball game with Tyler when he was in 6th grade. My wife did not work at the time, and I was on the road a lot. She's like, Tyler's on the basketball team. He's doing really good. He's having so much fun. And I'm like, oh, man, this is great. I love it. So I go to the basketball game. Like you guys, I'm pretty competitive. Mm-hmm. And I watch Tyler on the field or on the court, and there's 9 guys down on one end of the court, and there's one kid standing on the wrong end staring at the wall. And I'm going, Tyler, I'm waving. We're going you got to go over, and then he runs down and the other 9 run by him the other way. And I'm going, this is terrible. I said, this is terrible. Carlo, this is terrible. And at the time,
that was me, by the way, too. I was no good at basketball. They kicked me out of the basketball court and sent me to the wrestling room.
We should have. We did something. But at that time, we started to hear some rumors of, not so much in Minnesota, but nationally, some of these high school teams, fishing teams popping up. And that's in his DNA. That's in his blood. I mean, he's driving a boat already. He's running electronics already. Let's do it. And that's what was originally my motivation to start it. And I don't know what the numbers are now, but when we started, about 40% of kids that jumped onto the high school fishing programs did not have another sport.
Mm-hmm.
So they they weren't in band, they weren't in choir, they didn't play football. That's what they had. And then we gave them a cool jersey. We did fun things like we call Fishy Friday. They wear all the way to their jerseys. And they had these groups, these cliques, these groups of friends that were like-minded, that loved to fish. It wasn't like they went to school on Monday and said, hey, did you watch the NCAA tournament? And, Wiggins had 28, 16 boards. And that wasn't their mentality, but that was never the mentality. Instead, dude, check out this crappie I caught this week, and this thing was a stud. You know what I mean? And from there, it went poof.
Well, I want to talk about, I think this is probably the right time to explain that was it you that founded the SATT, or was there other people with you? So the Student Angling Tournament Trail is a Minnesota-based high school fishing organization across the state.
Yep.
Talk about the founding procedures and how you got that going.
Yeah, so we did, and that was actually Tyler's fault. I'm going to tell a real funny story, and I'm not going to throw any organization under the bus because it was done locally and not nationally. But Tyler won the Minnesota Junior Championship, and my fishing tournament partner, Mike Peterson, who you know, I had his son in my boat. His son took second. So in that scenario, they take the top 2 kids from the state. They make them a pair of a team. They go fishing nationals. All right? So we're excited.
What was the umbrella organization?
BASS.
Oh, it was BASS.
BASS.
Okay.
So we go down there to something County Lake.
Carroll County.
Tennessee.
In Tennessee.
And so we knew it was going to be expensive. We were driving a motor home, and you're doing some of the same stuff right now. So we go out, we raise a pile of cash. And one of the big ones that said they would help us was Lund Boats. That started our relationship with Lund. And we told them we're going to do a jersey. We're going to do all these things, right? And so literally a few days before the Derby, the state representative, BASS, says, you guys are going to wear this jersey. And it had Triton on it, and it had all these things on it, which were all great companies. But I'm like, guys, we did this work. These kids did this work. I'm sorry, this is what we're going to do. And we weren't taking any money from that organization to go down there. Long of it short, we go down there. Troy and Tyler had a great derby. They get up on stage. They hold their bass. They've been watching bass fishing their whole lives. They do the whole thing. And we get back, and on Monday morning, I get a call from my superintendent. Now, mind you, at this time, I had the largest fishing team in the country. We had 120 kids. I get a call from my superintendent, and he says, we're going to discontinue the fishing team.
No.
I said, what are we talking about? He said, apparently you broke a bunch of rules, and I got a call from this organization, and so this is what we're going to do. I said, I had no idea what's going on. Literally no idea what's going on. Well, a few of my other buddies coached as well. One, Dave Schuck, who's a guide now from Lakeville. Chris Weed is coaching the Minnetonka team. Tim Bray was coaching the Pequot Lakes team. Anyways, they got this email from BASS. It says, talk about integrity and all this stuff. So I flipped. I called them to obviously upset. But not only did they suspend my fishing team, BASS suspended Tyler and Troy for 3 years
for wearing jerseys?
For wearing jerseys.
Good grief.
And suspended my fishing team. So it was a big problem. Long of it short, I got the school calmed down. I got national BASS involved. Those other coaches wrote letters to the gentleman who's no longer involved, by the way, what they thought about this. And so I got reinstated. Okay. But that at that point, I realized that we need to do something different. We gotta be better than this, and that started the SATT. That's where we started. The other part of it was, in order to win a scholarship, you had to travel cross country. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to do it here. So Lund Boats actually donated us a boat. We raffled it off, and all of a sudden now we're paying almost $100,000 in scholarships right here in the state, and the kids don't have to leave. So that's. I know that was a long way about
Well, yeah,
it, but that's what started the SATT.
Well, it indicated the need, right? You needed to have something local that made sense. And I think about that time, I mean, if you remember, the FLW for a long time made their pros wear their jerseys on the final day of competition. Sure. And they got real tired of that. That was
Sure.
it was just I understand from their perspective why it was started and why it was done that way. But you're right. If you're going to work your way up to fish that event, and you have people that have contributed to that, Lund, Humminbird, whomever, they deserve a spot on your jersey. And you should be able to fly that flag. That's promotion.
When we're told it. Now, had they come to us up front, right, and said, here is what the expectation is, this is what we're going to do, fine. I'm going to, instead of going to Lund, I'm going to go to the local Eagles Club and get money there, you know.
There's a different way to go about it.
We would have done it differently, you know. But to tell two 12-year-old kids that they're suspended from an organization over that.
It just, yeah.
Needless to say, that gentleman is nowhere near bass fishing anymore, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. But
well, I think that was a largely evolving time frame, right? Where there was a lot of changes happening and the interest was exploding, and it's still getting super popular across the board. And you know, there are colleges now that offer scholarships, full rides to go to college to fish for them, and you know, that's planting the seeds. It's growing the tree from the seeds we planted, right? It's getting everybody involved, and you're preparing anglers to become top level competitors. And you know, one of the things that this is a good example. When I was at Bass, there was a lot of discussion about, you know, the opens format and how it was, you know, you couldn't luck your way into it, but if you drew a good series of lakes in the Central Opens or the Northern Opens or whatever, like, you had a pretty decent chance, if you were really good, to, you know, make the cuts to be on an elite series. Well, fishing 3 opens in a tri-state area of where you live is nothing like fishing the elites.
Right.
And as a result, there were guys that were making the elites that had no business being there. Now, This is not to say they weren't good anglers or good dudes, but the business side of that lifestyle, you aren't getting that experience on those opens. And that's where the EQs essentially came from, was providing that real life experience. If you want to be considered at an elite contender, you need to fish the 9 tournaments or whatever it is now. I know it changed again this year. You had to have that investment, not just time, physical, but financial investment, because let's be honest, it costs $100,000+ to just fish the elites a year. Right. Not what you're bringing in. That's the cost out of pocket. Right. So you want to make sure that you're not putting people's lives on the line. And there was a lot of that. There was a lot of second mortgages. There was a lot of bankruptcies. The trail to the Classic is littered with broken hearts and broken homes. Right. I've seen it.
Absolutely. You know better than anybody.
So I like that we're preparing kids now with providing an opportunity that maybe they're not into athletics, maybe they're not going to play sports, they're not good enough, whatever it is. This is an avenue to be involved in a team, which we would all agree is a very important component to growing up. You're on the water, you're associating with like-minded people, you're building relationships with friends, with coaches, with sponsors, whatever the case may be. You're having that experience, and it's preparing you for that next step, for whether it be college fishing or classic bass, right? That's a next step. That's not the end of the line. But if you're going to get somewhere, you need to have the foundation.
And you have to understand that part of it, right? Like, you have to understand his brother went to Montevallo, got a very nice scholarship. And I would call him, where are you at today? I'm on Hartwell. I'm on Gunnersville. Like, he spent way more time on the water, but he also got to understand that there was a lot of opportunity in the fishing industry without being a professional bass fisherman, because even though the school was covering his expenses, for example, he was getting a good whiff of what that was like.
It's not easy.
It's not easy. Traveling 14 hours and then having to fish 14-hour days for 3 days of practice, and then, you know what I mean? It's a grind.
It sounds good on paper. It really does. But I'll be honest, like, I had aspirations to fish professionally for a long time. And having spent 5 years on the road, going to every elite, half the opens, a couple college, high school, nation events, I was on the road for 25 weeks a year. I had a great time, and it was a first-class education. I am not cut out for that. I don't have the stomach to fish 4-day derby.
It's great. The foundation of In-Fisherman was literally, and he'll tell the story, Al Linder coming off a BASS derby, driving home, talking to his wife and saying, I'm at a crossroads. I'm at a very big crossroads, and I think that a media company is a better fit for me than doing these tournaments.
Well, it's funny. He sat in that chair right there and told that story not too long ago.
Is that right?
Yep, that's a true story. And I think that what you're saying is something that I would put out to every angler fishing the SATT or high school events across the country is tournaments are great. And I love that there are tiers, right? I have zero aspirations to fish anything beyond. I think when my kids graduate, I would consider fishing the Classic Bass Series. That's that's as high as I would ever want to go.
Sure.
And maybe not, because dang, those Thursday nighters are a lot of fun too.
Yeah,
I have a good time there. So I think that people understanding that there are ways to make a living with your passion in the outdoors other than being a pro angler.
Absolutely.
And there's nothing wrong if that's your dream. Just know that it's a risky dream, and it's an NFL level dream. I mean, to make it to the elites and to fish competitively for a career, it's very unlikely.
There's more NFL players times 10 than there are professional bass fishing at that level. I mean, true story. You know, and you take all the professional sports combined, like your chances are seriously better of becoming a PGA golfer. I mean, it's just the reality, and I don't want to take that away, because I encourage our kids. You know what? If that's what you want, you go for it. You know, you give it all you got, and more kids now have that opportunity than ever before. It's not the good old boys club anymore.
It's very competitive.
It's very competitive, and some of the, I mean, Eastern Fothergill won 2 Opens last year.
Yeah, right.
I mean, come on.
That's pretty awesome.
It's pretty awesome. But
and a guy from here and grew up fishing SATT.
Yeah, fishing. You know, what do we get? 6 months where we can fish out of a boat. You know, it's kind of like baseball players coming from Texas. Why are they so good? Because they get to play baseball 12 months of the year.
Right. We don't. We get sledding.
Yeah.
Tyler, what are your aspirations? Do you have plans to fish the Opens? And I mean, they're coming back to Minnesota this year, right?
Yeah, I know they're doing one on Leech again, I believe, but I don't mean it's so much money's a problem. Like you talk to Elite Series anglers, and I don't think there's a single one that actually makes a living off of tournament winnings. It's impossible.
You can't.
The guys that are making a living doing it have these big contracts with these companies.
Right. When I say you can't, I think that's the wrong way to fish. If you're depending on your winnings,
right,
I think your mindset changes, and you got to have a clean mind when you're making the next cast. And if you're like, if I don't catch a big bass in the next 20 minutes, like my career's over. Like
I can't eat.
Yeah, that I think was a problem.
Tom, you can relate to this. I mean, on a Thursday nighter, you dump a 3.5 pounder and makes you want to throw your rod in the lake and put it on the trailer and go home.
That's right.
I can't imagine fishing at that level and having that kind of pressure, thinking if I don't catch that next fish, I can't eat tomorrow.
Yeah,
you know, my kids don't eat tomorrow.
And I do think that there are some families that make it work, where the families go with you on the road, or single guys can make it work for a while. But if family is important to you, it's just not very conducive long term, and it's important to me. It's important to you guys. Can it be done? Absolutely. But I cut you off. You're talking about the money it takes and the commitment.
Right. It'd be such a huge commitment, and I don't know if I could do that or not. I mean, even classic basses, it's a lot of money between entry fees, traveling, hotel, food, gas. I mean, this summer between entry fees and stuff, I got over $5,000 just in that 4 events. I mean, I couldn't imagine doing 9 events
at $5,000 a pop for an entry fee.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it'd be a dream to do it in the future, but I don't see it in the near future. I mean, it'd be a dream, but I just don't know if I'm ready to go, like, make my whole focus just on that.
It sounds attractive. I mean, there are parts of that I love traveling the country and seeing these fisheries, and I'll tell you this, every place I've been made me appreciate Minnesota even more, because we have such an amazing bass fishery here. And I think this is important for you to keep in mind too, Tyler. Like, we have the types of fisheries that I would call the proving grounds, because if you want to learn how to use any style bait, you can go to any lake in Minnesota and basically find a way to make it work. And that was confidence that I had when I moved south. Of course, I got tremendously humbled. I'm like, I know how to catch bass. I'm going to go fish Gunnersville. Yeah, here's 0 fish on the day, Thomas, way to go. Or a blown out lower unit, whatever it is. You do learn how to apply basically every technique here within the confines of the law. And you can take that to southern fisheries and apply it. And I think that's pretty dang cool. You have that in your backyard here.
Right.
Now,
No, and you get spoiled. I mean,
it is.
I think, or it was Tyler. So I brought Kyle, which is Tyler's brother. Kyle won something. Anyways, we traveled to southern Illinois. Tyler was a lake.
Kincaid?
No, it was
Started with a C.
I can think of it at the top of my head. It's a reservoir.
It'll come.
Southern Illinois?
Yeah. It'll come. But Carlisle, Lake Carlisle.
Carlisle,
Yep. And so we go there, and so the TBF regional championship. So it's like 12 boats is having their deal out there. And we pull up to a point, Tyler chucks out a yellow crankbait and catches a 3-pounder. And I thought those guys were going to cry. Like, it was weird because they set up the high school practice during their derby. We got back and watched the weigh-in, and it was incredible how many guys blanked and how many guys came up to them afterwards and said, "What was that? What were you throwing?" None of them caught any fish. Mm-hmm. You know, and it was just, that was one of our first experiences of going on the road and fishing. The next year we went out to the Ohio River. I think there was 2 bags caught and 14 blanks. You know, it's incredible what we got here. It's pretty awesome.
It's awesome, but it prepares you to become well-rounded. One of the things I think that the older generation of competitive anglers, like, there was the guys that were really good at their presentation. You know, Van Dam was the crankbait guy, and then you had Denny Brower with flipping jigs, and, you know, Matt Herron, arguably one of the best dock skippers in the business, and they were all really good. When that bite was going on, they were contenders. Now I feel like the younger generations are so well-rounded that you really can't predict who's going to do well necessarily. Sometimes you can, but it's surprising right now how everybody has a good foundation. And this, I'm curious what Tyler thinks of this. You've kind of grown up in the technological age. I know your early days, you guys probably had, you know, you still use flashers and whatever. You knew the old days, but you still have to build a foundation to be competent with the electronics. Did electronics come easy to you? Was that something you enjoyed picking up, or did you force yourself to do it?
I mean, I think now the technology is so good that anyone can get good at it in a short amount of time. I mean, it's, in my opinion, you spend one summer using Mega Live 2. I mean, it didn't take long at all, and these people catch on to it so fast. And I think the younger generation growing up with games and stuff, it's no different. You're reading a screen. That's what you're doing. And I think, like I said, the technology now is so good that you can pick up on it very easily. It reads fish so well. The maps are so accurate, run so good.
But your foundation's important.
Right.
If you don't understand a bass, I don't know how good the technology is going to be for you.
Exactly.
Right?
No, and I think the mapping now is a huge part of that. I mean, it's
yeah, they want to outlaw forward-facing sonar, but you want to talk about a game changer? Mapping was a game changer.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. I still don't know what I'm throwing at forward-facing sonar, but I can find the spot on the spot on the spot on the spot. You know,
yeah, with a map and a waypoint.
And so can 10 other people.
Well, and I think you're totally right. It gets you there faster, but my argument has always been, without the foundation, you can't just snap your fingers and make fish jump in the boat. And I feel like it's easy to say this generation, this younger generation it's easy for people to say they got too good too fast. If you go to every one of these kids that are on the Elite Series now, I'll bet you they were fishing with a bass boat with good quality equipment, and somebody committed to taking them out at a very early age. And that to me is a part that gets overlooked way too much, is you had somebody that cared enough, that saw the passion in these kids, that made sure they not only had the equipment, the boat, and the access, but somebody was willing to give them the time.
To show them. And we talked about high school fishing, or we've been talking about, I think it's hilarious on the impact. It's not hilarious the impact it's having now. It's having a great impact. And truly, most of those kids that get involved stick with it. You think to 20 years ago, I'll never forget, my little kid sister went to this, I don't know what it was. Anyways, they got to this fishing pier in a foot of water. I mean, literally, you could see sand everywhere. There's not a fish on it anywhere. You can't cast far enough to get to any kind of weed line, any kind of structure, nothing. They give them a Zebco rod, a 4-foot-long Zebco rod, and nothing against Zebco, but something along the terms of a 303 or 203, whatever they were. They make a few casts. They send it home with them all tangled up. It goes in a closet. It never comes back out again. And that was the old adage of how to get kids fishing. That's how we thought we were going to get them fishing. Mm-hmm. That didn't work.
No.
It's not going to work. Now we're taking kids out. We're putting them in a nice boat. We're giving them a useful fishing rod. We're putting them on some fish, and they're usually catching some fish. Mm-hmm. And guess what? It's weird because they want to come back. They want to do it. They want to do it again.
So what is your opinion on? I think that if my sons had an opportunity to fish out of a nice boat, the fish don't care what you're in, right? They'll bite whatever you're in. But what is your opinion on? You get out in what you can get out in. I'm trying to think of the way to phrase this. You shouldn't not go because you're ashamed of your boat, I guess is what I'm trying to say. If you have a boat, go.
I mean, I grew up in a 12-foot with a 15-horse, a 12-foot lawn with a 15. Mm-hmm. And, we'd go to the landing during opener, and at that time it was the Yar crafts and all this stuff. And you know what? My dad was damn proud of that boat, and he was damn proud. I know that stringer of walleyes could have just easily been flipped to the inside of the boat in a bucket. Mm-hmm. Oh, no. Those walleyes were always dangling off the side on that steel stringer, just to make sure that he showed people, hey, you know what? I might got a little boat, but I can still catch some fish.
I feel like one thing I'll never do, and I've gotten to the point in my life where I'm able to afford a nice boat, I'll never judge another person's boat because I had some real crappy boats.
Yeah.
And I think that it's easy to compare yourself to somebody else, and you maybe don't know their story. You maybe don't know what they went through to get that boat, whether it's a nice boat or a tin can. You don't know what they went through to get it. And I feel like it's real easy to pass judgment on a lesser quality boat without knowing that angler's story or really how good they are or where they're at in the process of life.
Exactly.
And I don't want people to not get involved in high school youth fishing because they feel like they don't measure up.
We both know a guy, Thomas. I think of a couple, but one that sticks out in my brain is Evan Blakely. Mm-hmm. When I first started fishing against him on Thursday nighters, he had that old gray Crestliner, and that boy took more money off of me out of that freaking old Crestliner than anybody I know. Yep. And I agree with that 1,000%. And one thing about the SATT is we recognize that very early on. And that's why we allow our kids to take off from any access. You know what? If you got a 25 horse and your spot is only a mile from that access, then go take off from there. Mm-hmm. We don't want to put 200 boats together to have them take them off. And the kid, oh man, he's got 2 16-inch graphs on the front. He's got a 300 horse and 2 power poles. And you can't go into a derby like that. Mm-hmm. You've already lost, right?
Yeah.
Go take your little boat. Go find a spot. It does not matter. I mean, I agree with that so much.
It's easy, though, in that with the amount of media, I talked about this earlier, the amount of media that covers professional fishing, it's real easy to have the mindset of, I got to have this boat, this electronics, this brand rod and reel to be successful, and that's just not the case.
Not the case.
Was it 2 years ago, I think it was, the kid that won the college bracket to make the Bassmaster Classic was fishing out like a 1990s old Nitro with the 50 horse on it, had one little graph on it, mm-hmm. and he won the Bassmaster College bracket to fish he didn't fish a Classic out of that boat, but he won the college bracket out of that boat. Little electronics.
Look at Jake Wheeler's story. I mean, Jake Wheeler's story with that old green tri-hull that he had to borrow to go fish at Derby.
Yeah.
You know, if he doesn't do that, he's not where he's at right now.
Yeah.
You know,
I feel like there's an element of earning your stripes. And, you know, I'll be honest, my son has not had to fish out of a crappy boat. But I sure did. And he's been involved in us putting together our boats, and the boat that he has now needs overhauled, right?
Sure.
The motor's good, the hull's good, the carpet's meh, the rest of it's getting gutted and we're cleaning it up. So there's going to be some investment there. My first boat had a tree growing out of it when I found it. So, I mean, there are times that you kind of have to just get on the water and go. And so I guess my message here with this point of our conversation is, don't find excuses to not go. And most especially, don't compare what you have to someone else, because mutually you don't know each other's stories. Right. And I've had a dream for a long time to have a new boat, right? This is my first year I got a brand new boat. Don't let that be a reason to not get your kids out and go.
No, absolutely not. And don't let you being a walleye guy think that you can't drive a couple young guys and gals around and catch a couple bass. Mm-hmm. Because you can, you know, just get them on the water, give them that experience. That's what the whole thing is about that. You
said something to me last year, and this is it's burned into my mind, and I can't disagree with this in any way, shape, or form. Is your goal with this from the get go, and probably till the day you retire or probably die, is that you want kids to go fishing, and you are never going to stand in their way or provide any roadblock to keep them from doing it.
No, and I think. You know, obviously I'm a big advocate of it, but I think high school fishing has accomplished a lot of that. I really do. And just the awareness and just other kids, there's so much value and so much power into two kids sitting in the lunchroom, swapping fishing stories that met each other through some kind of club or organization. Mm-hmm. You can't put value on that. Mm-hmm. You absolutely cannot put value on it. And unfortunately, because of our schools with, you know, the perception of guns and, I'm going to say, quote unquote, hicks and all this stuff, these kids need to find other kids like them they're not going to run a 4.40. They're not going to win the track championship. They're not going to play football.
Well, I think being comfortable in who you are happens when you got like-minded friends.
Absolutely.
And that was it kind of took me probably through my high school years. You know, I found a group of buddies that loved to hunt and fish, and that kind of, you know, when I got into college, I never finished college, mind you, that's another story, but I found like-minded friends as well. And then when you get into the industry, I think it takes a while to become your own dog.
Sure.
And once you have that confidence, the sooner you have that confidence, the better off you're going to be.
Sure.
But people that kind of fuel that fire, those relationships in your life, whether it's a dad, a grandfather, aunt, uncle, mom, whomever, get that fire started. And by God, we're not going to go into a deep dive into electronics, because we talked about it a lot on the show just over the past multiple episodes. But that to me is one of the biggest hang-ups for people, is they think they can't beat somebody with live scope or forward-facing sonar. Let me tell you a quick story. Last year at the NCBs, I had a great day on Woman Lake. Watch out there. I caught 21 pounds. I was pretty happy. Caught a 5.2. Man, this is one of the best tournaments of my life. I got 7th place. I got totally kicked in the teeth. But that whole tournament was forward-facing sonar, okay? That's how that one played out. Then for the championship of that event was on Big Winnie.
Winnie, yeah.
I didn't have my front graphs turned on the whole day, because those fish were super shallow in the weeds, and it was a flipping game.
Sure.
Now maybe there was a winning bass out in the open water. I don't know, but I don't feel like, and even the elites, Major League Fishing, you know, they're setting their schedule now to accommodate both styles of angling, and you're going to see people do well with forward-facing sonar on bodies of water that maybe had never seen it before. Okeechobee, last year or the year before when Tyler Rivette won?
Yeah, yeah.
First time, right, that had played there. Now, to the point I made earlier, the foundation that you need to be good with electronics needs to be your priority. And that might happen in a 12-foot John boat. That might happen in a 16-foot Lund, whatever it is. You have to go out, wet a line, figure out where the bass live and why they want to bite. And we live in the greatest state in the country to understand the bass.
And how to catch them, right?
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to.
Mm-hmm.
Go catch a bass.
Go catch a bass.
Go catch a bass. And you can do it out of a kayak.
You can. Yeah. We'll go downstairs when we're done here. You'll see my projects. But kayak fishing is a whole nother realm. I'm surprised. I've been all over the country with the kayak thing too, and there are kayak communities exploding across this country, especially near certain big bodies of water along the coast. You know, that's a real big thing down there, and it doesn't seem to be catching on very well here. I mean, there are people that have kayaks, but it's not like there's kayak shops in every town, and there's not a kayak organization here.
Or a trail. Yeah,
a trail. I feel like it would make great sense if there was a kayak trail here. So I think Brainerd would be a prime location for a competitive kayak group, but I just don't think there's enough interest here yet. And I don't know that this is a problem, but I think if there is a roadblock to the kayak world, it's the abundance of 14 and 16-foot Lund boats everywhere.
Sure. Everywhere. Right?
Everywhere here. And I don't know that you have that necessarily in other states. You know, I think Minnesota, maybe Wisconsin, has an abundance of those boats. And so maybe the kayak thing is for you.
Sure.
And I would love to see a club pop up here in Brainerd that has a weeknight. Maybe it's a twice a month or a once a month league night. And I would be all over that. It'd be fun.
You know, I think that's interesting because I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but you'd probably get two different types of people, right? You'd get one who just I'm going to go prove it. I can do this out of a kayak.
Yeah.
And then you'd get the guy or gal who's kind of like, you know, I'm going to stroll around. I'm going to look at some birds. I'm going to see some turtles. You know what I mean? I'm just going to go out here and enjoy the heck out of myself. And
to me, kayak fishing, and we've written about this in our magazine over and over again, it's a more intimate experience.
Sure.
But here's what it was for when I saw Tommy. I watched this happen. This is a cool thing as a dad. It gives you independence, right? So he's young. He's not taking my bass boat out by myself, but he can take the kayak out, and he's in control, right? He's able to pull up to a spot, back up, go around, make a cast. It's all on him. And we were at a small lake in Oak Mountain State Park in Birmingham, Alabama. There's a couple lakes in there that have some nice bass in it. And I remember we launched a kayak, and he was like gone. As soon as he could get away from me, he was out across the lake. And I stood on the shore just watching because I saw him discover he can put himself into position to make the right cast without Dad over his shoulder. And I'm telling you guys, his first cast at a blowdown tree, he caught a bass by himself. And instinctually, he pedaled backwards, pushed himself out. And I think that opportunity kind of made him realize he could do this.
Sure.
And I don't know that he'd tell the same story, but as his turning point. But to me, I saw a young guy get independence in a kayak, make a good cast, catch a fish, and complete the circle.
That's awesome.
And so I think the kayak provides the opportunity for you to be on your own. And by God, you can buy a cheap one at Fleet Farm, or you can spend $6,000 on one. I mean, whatever you want to do.
$200, right? $200, you could be on the. Don't they make little trailers now, right? If I want to get my little trailer up to my bike and ride it down to the river, I can do that.
It's funny you say that. So those, the e-bikes are a popular thing now, right? And you can have, those batteries you can get miles and miles out of those things. But there are a bunch of lakes in Minnesota that don't have actual accesses, or they're landlocked.
So I think that's something that we should do as a high school organization.
Have a kayak day,
or some kind of kayak day, or something. Even if it's statewide, statewide on your phone. And the Lund Virtual League does allow kids to fish out of a kayak, but they're competing against kids in boats with 250 horsepower motors. I don't think they feel like they can be relevant, but if we held it exclusive to kayaks, I think we could have some fun with that.
I'd like to see how that works. And let's briefly talk about the format of the SATT. So it is a catch, weigh, release format. Mm-hmm. So you put the fish on a regulated ruler, take a picture, submit it to the app. You're placed that way. So it does. Now I'm sure people are like, well, how do you know the actual weight of a fish? Well, that's true, but when everybody's on that playing field, it's equal.
It's average, right?
So it's averaged out. But the kayak tournament world is based on that exact same format. You put the bump board across your knees, take a photo of your fish with a marker of some sort. I would love to see a statewide, or even maybe it's a SATT get together, a kayak derby. And I mean, we've got 10 of them here. Like, I'll bring them all. I mean,
we should do that. I mean, that would be something we certainly could do with our local club, and that's something that we could
kind of test the waters.
And I think it's just, like you say, it's just an opportunity to get on the water, never, ever, ever should there be a stop from a kid going out on the water of having access to the water. And that's one thing I've been very proud of the Brainerd Warrior fishing team, the SATT. We've yet to leave a kid on the dock that wanted to fish.
Mm-hmm.
We found that boat captain. We found that volunteer. One thing I got to give, because we were pretty hard on the DNR earlier, but their new initiative, I'm glad Sarah Stroman recognized this, but she said, you know what? Our fishing piers are in like 8 inches of water. You can't catch any fish off of them. So all those dollars they got from the budget last year are getting allocated to putting these fishing piers in areas where you might actually catch a fish. And I think between that and kayak accesses and things like that, just you got to get on the water.
You're right. We were and rightly so hard on the DNR for some issues, but they do care about the fisheries here. And I think deep down the goal is to make it accessible for everybody, make it as good as it could possibly be, and that's what we want. And if a big boat's not your jam, you can hop in a kayak, and that might be what makes you happy. And that's really what it comes down to. The beautiful thing with fishing is if you want to fish a tournament, you got tremendous numbers of opportunities all over the state and the country. If you don't want to fish a tournament, we got 10,000 lakes here that just beg for you to put a boat in.
Yeah. And quiet, and you can go catch whatever you want.
That's right, and have a good time. Tyler, before we wrap up here, being the younger generation here, and high five, you're keeping guys like your dad and I on our toes. You grew up in a fishing family, and you know the value of being on the water and what it means to fish competitively at the high school, junior high school, and beyond. So what advice do you have to younger anglers that want to get into the sport of fishing, whether it's tournament or not?
Yeah, I mean, really, you guys nailed it. Get out fishing, that's all it is. I mean, if you got a buddy that lives on a lake, fish off the dock. That's what me and Kyle grew up fishing. We lived over on North Long Lake and Love Lake growing up, and me and Kyle were down fishing off the dock every day. I mean, if we could go out in the boat, great, but just fishing off the shore, I mean, the main thing is just getting out fishing. Just going. Loving it.
You guys are tackle junkies too, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. You like making your own baits and modifying things, and I mean, you guys are into the science of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not like super geeky with it, but I like to play around with some different stuff, that's for sure.
So if you had to pick one presentation for the rest of your life, I'm gonna throw this to you too, Jason. So get your mind ready. One presentation for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It really depends. Like, I fish the classic bass, which is every fish counts, and it's really, really hard to go against a Nico rig for me.
Golly, I don't throw that nearly enough.
All the lakes we fish. Last summer, classic bass, I bet I caught over 80% of my bass throwing one bait a Nico rig.
What's your specific details for that rig?
5-inch wacky worm, nail weight in it, 10-pound fluoro leader. It's all nothing fancy at all.
And they don't say no to that.
Nope, just a 5-inch wacky worm, throw a weight in it, and
do you rig those beforehand? You know what my biggest problem with the Nico rig is
time.
Yeah, it's putting them together. It's almost like you got to sit down in the winter and make 100 of them.
Yeah, I do rig them. I'll spend an hour or two the night before Derby just getting 100 of them ready.
Do you put a nail weight in it or an actual like a VMC Nico weight? What do you like?
Like just a Nico weight, yeah. I like a couple brands make the tungsten ones, and the biggest thing too is you gotta have the band. Not like the O-ring, the thin O-ring, but you gotta have an actual wide band. Otherwise, the weight will tear the worm in half.
Seems like every fish I caught on that stupid presentation would come up and jump and flap, and the nail weight would go flying off. You're like, man, that thing's gone. But I think that's the secret to that one is spend your time beforehand getting them rigged up.
Yep.
All right, your favorite presentation, Jason?
To be honest, I just started bass fishing when they started bass fishing for the high school stuff. So I walleye fished, and we trolled. I mean, we trolled. I trolled. I don't know how many miles. So a number 5 shad wrap is probably to this day the bait that I've caught my most fish on. I still love, even in our walleye league that we fish back at home here, I love a number 5 shad wrap.
It's funny. I had Mark Fisher in here yesterday.
Oh, wow.
We got his story put down on tape here, and he said the same thing. Like, there's something special about that Shad Rap, and the bass will eat it too.
Yeah.
It's a good lure across the board, but
It
trolling
just
a
works.
Shad Rap.
It just works.
That's a good time. Guys, this has been a lot of fun. And I love the spirited conversation about what we can do to make things better. And it's not, we're not sitting here to bring anybody down. It's a passion for the resource, and it's a passion for the sport. And I mean, you guys have exemplified that 10 Ways a Sunday with getting the SATT kicked off and running a bait shop, and how we need to have regulations to better accommodate not just you. It's not just you're asking for, it's the entire bait shop community in Minnesota. There are ways to do things better. And I think that as we are going further down the path that we're on currently politically, I believe that there is going to be a better level of accountability in government entities.
Agree.
And I think that is only going to make, from the federal government down to the DNRs and local and state legislatures, to be better. And that's what we want. We want a better resource.
Absolutely.
We want more people to enjoy.
A $5 billion, just in Minnesota, a $5 billion industry. We need to keep that baby going.
Yeah. Keep kids on the water. Make them want to come back. It's a good way to live.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, thank you. From Jason Bahr, from Tyler Bahr, this is Thomas Allen. You're listening to In-Fisherman Storyline. We'll see you here on the next one.